Hey everybody, that's an old nursery rhyme that I just fooled around with a little bit. Played it in the key of C. Just wanted to start with a really basic song today that's all in one chord, a one chord song, and just to demonstrate the simplicity around a one chord song, yet how you can improvise on top of it and play around with it in many different ways, because uh, it doesn't have to be a complicated song in order to add some complication or some interest to it. Anyway, before I get off on that track, I thought we'd talk a bit about relativity as it relates to things in life. And a visual representation of relativity came to mind to me the other day. I pictured a horizon of trees against the skyline, and in the distance, whereas the trees basically look to be all the same height, although we know that they're not, and we see between individual trees some are taller and some are shorter, and we don't have a difficulty in distinguishing which trees are which. And so most people could easily identify the shorter trees and the taller trees, yet we could say the trees are relatively the same height, and maybe they're all relatively the same age too. So we take that concept and we move it to sound and to tonality. And we could look at the keyboard. We could take a small section of the keyboard, and we'll start with middle C, and we could say, the notes between this G and that G, relatively, when you look at the 88 keys that the keyboard is composed of, that small group of keys with the 12 tones between them is relatively close to each other, and therefore not to be confused with keys on each end of the spectrum of the keyboard. Now, the thing is, just like when we look at trees and we can tell which are the taller and the shorter trees, with the keys we're not necessarily just using our eyes to distinguish which key is which is very easy. We know that this key is in the direction of up for argument's sake, and this key is in the direction of down from the starting point. So all keys in this direction, we could consider them higher, and all keys in this direction are lower. And not just in direction. I mean, obviously the keyboard is horizontal. If we were to face the keyboard on this end and stand it upright like this, then indeed these keys would be higher and these keys would be lower. But for the sake of tonality, these keys are in fact higher and these keys are lower. And to demonstrate that, I'll play this note, and I'll play this note. That's 2 octaves away from this C, 1 octave, 2 octaves. It's easy to see that this C is higher, or you can see it visually, and I want you to focus on hearing how it's higher. And likewise, if we go in the opposite direction and go down 2 octaves to the lower C down here, it's apparent that visually that is lower, but also when you listen to the tone, it's lower. Now, some people have difficulty with that basic concept, and it doesn't come naturally to them to be able to distinguish which way is which. But that's a really important thing to be able to distinguish if you intend to be able to play by ear, and it's something I think you can learn. So when you group the notes closer together, it's maybe more tricky to distinguish, possibly. If we were to go to the immediate neighbor of a C in an upward direction, you can hear that both notes are different. They're distinct, and hopefully you can tell that this note is higher. This note, in fact, is higher than this note. And in the other direction, of course, this note is higher than this note. Now, if you're having trouble with that, I suggest you use your voice and sing either internally or out loud, because there's a connection between your brain and your voice that when you're determining a pitch with your voice, you're going to pretty well know intuitively which direction is which. So if you sing, you you can hear the difference between that. You can feel it. You can sense it within. And so the reason I'm telling you this is because when we want to learn a song and play by ear, not use sheet music or that form of interpretation, we need to be able to sing the song first before we can attempt to play it by ear as a beginner. And I'm starting today with Three Blind Mice. As simple as it is, it's a great song to learn with because everybody knows that melody, and you can sing it already, no doubt you can sing it. So I suggest you hum it and sing it a lot for 10 minutes or so, or just run it through your mind when you have a moment, and pay attention to the direction of the notes. And I'll play it for you. So it's a pretty easy song to listen to, and it's not a hard one to learn. And you see that there's a pattern here in the first part. You have a descending pattern where we're playing it in the key of C so that we don't have any accidentals that we have to worry about. There are accidentals, I suppose, but we don't see them visually because we're not using any of the black keys in the C major chord, which is the C scale. The beauty about the C scale, from a learner's perspective, is that you don't have to consider the black notes, and that's just one other thing to have to overcome with fingering and knowing the formulas to get around the different tonalities for scales in different keys. So in Three Blind Mice, you're just descending to each neighboring white note coming down, and then you're moving up to the next tone. And the next part of the song, you're jumping up to it's a repetitive passage, and then you repeat the beginning. Now, in music, these little statements, we're going to call them statements because music's a language. These are called motifs, and so this is a motif. It's just a sentence. We're saying something here. So music, like speech, is a language, and you're communicating your emotions and your thoughts musically instead of through words. And so, I'm saying Three Blind Mice musically. If you know the lyrics, you know that that's Three Blind Mice, and this is See How They Run. But you don't even have to know those words because it's sort of speaking in its own way. So each one of these little passages is separate unto itself, part of the story of the Three Blind Mice. And I like to look at all music that way. So when you're improvising, you want to be able to tell an interesting story that other people are going to want to listen to. And part of the story is to keep it not too complicated, but also a little bit challenging at times. Like you wouldn't just play, a whole song wouldn't just be comprised of this, because very quickly the listener would become bored and think, well, I know how that goes and it's never going to change, so I'll put on a different song. Especially nowadays with digital format, you can just shuffle and play. I mean, I don't even know if anyone really listens to a full song anymore. So that's something to take away. And what I want you to do as part of the practice is to not look at what I've just done, but you can listen to it. And I'll give you some lessons in a moment. But the idea here today would be to listen and copy me without looking at what I'm doing. So turn up your device enough that you can hear it at the keyboard. You might want to put it through a headset or headphones, or maybe you've got Bluetooth that you can Bluetooth to a PA system or stereo, I'm not sure. But the idea is that you listen to what I'm doing and replicate it either live or afterwards as ear training, so that you can train yourself to locate these notes that are on the keyboard. The idea is to be able to quickly locate notes with your ears at some point, so that you can hear a song, memorize it, the melody, and then be able to sit down and sort it out, what's happening with that song. Now, the song has a melody, but it also has, not in the nursery rhyme version necessarily, but in most versions of North American music, you don't, on a piano, you're not just playing with one hand. So you've got your bass. Your left hand as you're playing your bass. Now, in Three Blind Mice, you've only got one chord, so it's always C. So your left hand doesn't have to do too much except sound the C. Now, if we were to count this song in time, which all songs are written in some form of time, which is called the time signature, the time can be thought of as counting over and over again numbers. And we could count this into 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So your left hand, for the sake of today's lesson, on this song, we would just sound it on the 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keeps it very simple, and you don't have to focus on what the left hand is doing, because it's really only just activating those notes. And I'm playing an octave. I just typically find my hand fits at an octave. If you find an octave hard to reach, or it's a little challenging at this point, you just sound the C. You can sound it with any finger you want, although it's a good idea to sound it with your thumb, because typically when you were going to play bass, you would be playing chords, and you may want to learn to play an octave, and so we'll use our thumb to sound that note. We won't sound middle C, because middle C and the right hand's going to be playing some of these notes, and although you can play like this, there would be a time when maybe both fingers wanted to sound the same note, so you wouldn't get the same effect as if your hand was moved down an octave and then this note is separate from this, and so you're not sounding one note for two, if you know what I mean. So think about counting your song, and just practice very simply counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and playing the first little part of this. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another thing here to note is that there's a relation between the left hand and the right hand, in that we're playing in a key. The key is C, and in this case it's C major. C major scale. It composes all white notes on the piano. It's very easy to grasp. The biggest difficulty would be the proper fingering, which I've gone over, but for the sake of fingering, I'll just do it again. It's first 3 fingers followed by the thumb underneath, and then you just play the balance of the fingers. In other words, all fingers coming back down. When you get to the F, then your thumb, cross over this time, your 3rd finger over, and play the last 3 fingers hanging on the thumb. So that's the C major scale, and in this song, since it's only got one chord, your left hand only has to concern itself with the C. Now, if you wanted to up your game a little bit and make it sound a bit more full, you could decide, I'm going to play a C major chord in the left hand to sound on the count of 1. 1, 2, 3, 4 is the single note. Or you could take a C major triad chord, which a triad means 3 notes, each 3 apart. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So there's your 3 notes. 1, 2, 3, a triad. So we could play it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, you're only playing 3 notes here, but you're counting 4. That's because the time signature is 4 beats per measure, and a quarter note gets a beat. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is getting 2 beats because I'm going to hold it for the count of 2. That's how the song was written. I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but the author of the song didn't pen it that way. They wanted to hold this for a count of 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, that's a very basic rendition of Three Blind Mice. You might want to say, well, I want to add some tension to that. Maybe it's a sad mouse that was bitten by a rat, in which case let's move it to a minor key and see what that would sound like. So a minor, for the sake of this discussion, we're just going to move the third note of the C scale down half a tone. And before I even discuss that, I just want to point out that the scale is a series of events, so to speak, whereas there's a formula for this scale that is a whole step, and a half step, followed by a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and a half step. So you say, well, what does that mean? Well, there's the black notes to consider, and the whole steps are when you skip a half step. Makes sense, eh? Actually, each note is a half step away from its neighbor. In most cases, you see that they're defined by the black note in between, but not always. So let me just demonstrate a completely a scale that's completely half steps is referred to as a chromatic scale. And in that scale, you play every single note because you're playing all the half steps. So we would go. So you just played all the tones of the C scale, all 12 tones between the C and the C. Even though there's only 8 named notes between any octave, there are 12 tones because these half steps, called accidentals, they are part of the Western scale. We divide it in this way on the piano. So a major scale doesn't have any minor notes in it. A minor and a major are easy to determine by listening. Simply think happy and think sad, more melancholy, whatever you might think, cheerful, and maybe a cloudy day. Now, I'm playing a minor 7th and a minor 3rd, but for today's demonstration and lesson, we're just going to concentrate on the minor 3rd. Here's your 3rd, 1, 2, 3, and to come to the minor, you just drop it down to its neighbor, which is a half tone away, half step away. So now we're going to play the minor. So let's take that to the left hand, whereas we were going to play the left hand as a major chord for the regular version of Three Blind Mice. Now we're going to make it a minor. So we're just going to drop down the 3rd finger to half tone lower to the E flat. So now we'll try just to see what it would sound like. Now, if I wanted to incorporate the other minor tone of the 7, then I could even make it a bit more minor by going. You can hear the little difference between the left hand is making the minor statement, whereas the right hand is avoiding it by not playing the minor note in the first instance. Second instance, Now, a lot of people also use the 6th as a minor note too, so we could incorporate two minors. We could go minor B and minor A. So there you go, the unhappy mouse. And a minor scale that incorporated all those notes would just, instead of playing all the white keys, we would drop the tones of the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th down half a tone. That's a minor, and then you can have, you can change the minor to a different feel. You could not play the minor 7th, you could play a major 7th, but just a minor 6th. Sort of sounds like a snake charmer tone, you know, like that Middle Eastern sound. Sort of have a different tone altogether. So I just wanted to point those things out. The minor and major are your two most prominent, I guess, used chords in Western music. And other chords may be an augmented, where you would raise the 5th up a half a tone. So there's a major and then an augmented. Another popular one is a diminished, where you drop down the 5th and the 3rd half a tone. So instead of playing this, it'll go a little different than a minor. Here's the minor, and here's the diminished. Even more melancholy and introspective a tone. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was a lesson for this week. I wanted to incorporate rhythm training and ear training in one fell swoop. And I don't want to make it very complicated today, so we'll just keep it simple. But the idea would be I would play something and then you're going to replicate what I play. And you're not going to look at the video, you're just going to listen to it. So as an example, I would go. And then you would try that in the space in between. So let's do that a few times. I'll do it again. I'm going to repeat each one twice. So there's a few things for you to just practice and play with a little bit and see how you make out with that. And don't worry if you don't get it right away. Remember, you may want to listen to them and learn to sing them before you try to even practice them if you're having any difficulty, because really the key to learning anything is to be able to sing it first. And perhaps you would like to think about some of your nursery rhymes that you recall as a kid, or easy songs that you sang as a child or sang to your children, as the case may be, and sing them. And then sit down and see if you can play along or figure out the notes. Another thing when we talk about relativity is the relative pitch we talked about, whereas this note and this note and this note are all different. They're all related to each other, but they're all relatively different. This note is down in tone from this one, and this tone, of course, is up in tone from this one. Some people have an uncanny ability to be able to instantly know the actual tone. It's called perfect pitch, whereas that person could say that's a C. They can hear it in their internal mind. They know that's a C and they identify that. It's a great gift, but it's not a necessary gift to be a great musician, because you're going to find out what that tone is pretty quickly if you're fairly well versed and practiced on the keyboard. It's only a matter of time before you're going to eliminate the other 11 tones and find the 12th tone, if you went through all 11 before you found the right one. And so it's a great idea to practice that. Maybe you've got a wine glass in your collection that you could, or a singing bowl, different things that you may have in your home, an instrument, perhaps a recorder that you could blow a tone on, something like that, to challenge yourself to find the note. And again, this is really basic stuff, but it's great to have that ability to locate notes quickly, and that way when you want to hear, when you want to play the song, you're not struggling trying to find the notes, because you already know them in your mind, and then you can just fool around. So when you're improvising, of course, you're going to use the scale that the song is written in. Now, as I said, the Three Blind Mice is just one key. Some songs have multiple chords in them. In fact, most songs in Western music have more than one. There may be some with 2 chords. Let's take blues. Very commonly have three different chords. So you would have a 1 and a 4 and a 5. We use those terminologies in music as opposed to the name of the key quite often, just for ease of reference. When you have a group of people getting together and somebody says, okay, what are the chord changes to the song? And the person might say, well, it's a 1, 4, 5. So what key is it in? Well, it's in the key of C. So immediately you know that the 1 has to be the C, that's the starting point, and the 4 would be F, and of course the 5 is the G. So when you know that, no matter what the starting note is, maybe the starting note is a G. So 4 would be C, and the 5 would be the D. It is a good idea, obviously, even if you're not learning to read music, to know how to name each note quickly and efficiently so that you can locate each note on the piano. When we're looking at notes, the relative neighbor in the upward direction would be a sharp, and the relative neighbor in the downward direction would be a flat. So if I'm playing a G and I go down, the immediate neighbor is going to be that note, which in our case, because we started on G, this is going to be referred to as a G flat. Think of a flat tire. It's got less air in it. It still sort of sounds like the G, but it's got less going for it in the sense that it's flat. And a G sharp, well, that's like a tire that's got too much air pressure in it. It's like almost overinflated. So our flats are lower and our sharps are higher. And if we were playing in G, our chord changes for a blues 1, 4, 5 would be G, C, and D. Now, if you were playing in a G, then you would have to know the formula to make a major scale. As I talked about earlier, it's a whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So in a G, start on a G, a whole step is there because we've gone half, whole,